Thank you. I'm Bob Straus. I am a photographer. I've been a professional photographer for a little over 40 years. Before I was a photographer, it was never a hobby. I barely owned a camera. I had a Kodak, whatever the box thing was, and I was running an engineering company, and I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. So I went out and bought a camera and became a photographer. I didn't know anything about it. Never studied it. When I needed to know something, I would ask friends that were photographers, or I'd go to a camera store and ask questions. And there are guys now that have known me all those years. Some of the I live in Houston. I'm a Houston-based photographer, and some of the guys on the Houston Chronicle, for instance, most of them are now starting to retire. They know I don't know anything about it, and so they don't give me a hard time, but they do give me a lecture every once in a while. My background, I'm actually a Wharton economist from the Wharton School in the University of Pennsylvania. And then I studied in graduate school, and then in graduate school in race relations, which at that time was the only way you could do it was folklore. And I ran an engineering company. I was in the advertising business, and then I decided to be a photographer, and I've been one ever since. It has been a absolutely remarkable career. I've been all over the world. I've met anybody that you would want to meet and worked with them. And the emphasis is that the camera is just a remarkable tool. And I do a lot of work. I run a 501c3 now. If you're are you familiar with the Police Athletic League here in New York? Well, I run Police Athletic League in Houston when I'm not shooting. And I do a lot of work for 501c3s, and the camera allows you to do things that you can't do with any other medium. You can't do it with film. Still images last forever. Film doesn't, because you have to be able to dredge something up to actually make it work. So it's been a great career, and my talk this morning, which has to do with this. I don't know if any of you know what that is. Anybody ever seen one of those? I have 200 rolls of this in my refrigerator, which I have to figure out what I'm going to do with. But it basically has to do with film and how I came up. And a lot of this is going to be, with my apology, is going to be about me and how I developed what I do and where I've been and the conditions that I've worked under. And the title of it is Digital Photography with a Film Mindset. And what I mean by that is that when I shoot, I still shoot as I've shot digital for maybe 6 or 7 years exclusively. I teach digital. I'm on the teaching staff of the Center for Digital Imaging Arts at Boston University, and I lecture around the country. But my habits are film habits. And the purpose of this is for all of you who are shooting, I assume, digital, and there's a camera right there, to try and get you to think with a film mindset, so that your post-production is not the end result. And you know, I'll go into this later, but when we shot film, there's a complete transformation in thinking today, and when we shot film, often, no matter where we were in the world, and I'll go over this later, we'd shoot our film, take the raw film, put it in a bag, give it to a courier, and we'd go to dinner, and the courier would take it to New York or wherever our client was. And now everything has gone back to the photographer to do post-production. The purpose of this is that if you think the way we did with film, and the way most of you did, because most of you, if you've been photographing for a long time, you used film, you don't want to be wasteful. You want to make a good image to start off with, and if you make a good image, it cuts down on everything you have to do after that. And I've shot events where, and I probably shoot less than any of my contemporaries that shoot these events. And I do that because even with film, I never shot a lot of film. And when I'd shoot an open, for instance, there were people that shot 50 rolls of film a day when I was shooting 4. And I'd shoot, you know, maybe over the 2 weeks, I might shoot 40 rolls of film or 45 rolls of film, and they might shoot 400 rolls of film, which is fine, and we got free processing, so that helped. But the classic case, and the photographer's a great photographer, shoots for SI. He was a staff photographer for SI. SI, they want you to shoot a lot of film. He shot 2 matches. This was years ago. He shot 65 rolls of film. They ran 1 picture of Jimmy Connors leaning up against the clock on the court. Somebody had to go through all of that film, edit all of that film, and come up with that 1 picture. And when you use digital photography, I can guarantee you that all of you have become lazy, as in some ways I have, because you know you can put it on the computer and delete things. And you're going to shoot, you know, 300 images when you really only need 5 or 6. And one of what I've found with film is if you and we talked about this before you came in, if you pick the right film, which was balanced for the light and, you know, the conditions you were using it and the speed, and you exposed it correctly, you got what you got. I've never seen a digital image, I don't care what equipment you use, that could not use some correction. Now it might be pleasing to look at, but you could still make it better. And that's one of the problems with digital, is that it requires work. So the object of this is to get you to understand that if you shoot with a film mindset, where you're not overshooting for the sake of being able to delete it and fix it, you're going to be a lot happier once you finish your product, whatever you're doing, because then you can share it with your friends or email it or whatever you want, and you're not spending the next 18 hours working on a computer. All of the film, you know, I basically, when I tell people, when I teach this concept, I tell people that every time you shoot 36 frames, images, pretend like it's costing you $20, because it costs $20 to buy this film and process it. And for 30, I guess this is a 36. Yeah, it's a 36. And if you think that way, you all of a sudden realize that if you're shooting 3,000 images, it's costing you a lot of money. And you don't have to do it. I am not an expert on a computer. And many of you probably are or could be. I don't want to be that much, because I don't want to be on this computer all day long and all night long. Photoshop probably does 400 or 500 things. I can do 10 of them well, and those are the 10 that I use. And you know, if I have a problem, I've got to do something else, then I'll go and ask somebody, you know, what do I do next? I've got a friend that teaches that in Houston. He's a Reuters photographer, and I'll call him at 3 o'clock in the morning and ask him, you know, I've got to make this correction, and you know, how do I do it? But that's the basis of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to show you a lot of pictures. A lot of this is, again, with apologies, is going to be about me and what I do and how I've done it and the conditions that I've done it under. But everything I do today I still think as a film shooter. Now, one of the things you all do, I do it. I have my digital camera. I'm a Nikon shooter. I've always been a Nikon shooter. And not every picture I take, I look at the back of the camera to see if I knew what I was doing in the first place. On the rare occasions that I shoot film, I find myself looking at the back of the camera. There's nothing there, but you know, I still look at the back of the camera. There was never a time, as I said, I've gone all over the world. On the basis of a telephone call, my clients have sent me to all parts of the world, and spent tens of thousands of dollars just to get me there. I have never once in all those years doubted that I had the image. Not once. Now, it might not have been a perfect image, but I knew I had an image. And of course, I might not see it for 3 months because I'm shipping it back to New York or shipping it someplace, and and I don't see it until they send it back to me, or I go up to the office and and look through it. And when somebody spends that kind of money and that kind of time, and you have that much responsibility, you had to know what you were doing. And for the most part, I generally did. There were times when I had to wing it, and I'm doing that right now, by the way. But I learned so well in the field, because I said I've never studied photography, but I learned so well to the fundamentals and to apply the fundamentals that it became almost automatic. I can tell a quarter of a stop change by the way the sun feels on my neck. And I carry a light meter. I read it all the time. I read it indoors where the light doesn't change. I read it constantly. And of course, most photographers today don't even have a light meter. But I read it. I mean, I had it, at the tennis, and I'm all day. And of course, sometimes it's changing, and a cloud will go over, and so the light does change. But I rely on that. I don't use the automatic settings. I shoot in manual most of the time. I use automatic when there's a real problem with light, and it's far away from me, and I've got to open. It's dark, and I can't get a light reading. But I generally use manual settings. I shoot JPEG fine. I've only shot RAW once, and some of your clients want you to shoot RAW, and they want you to send everything to them. And one of the reasons they do that is I can't remember the guy's name, but a guy shot some pictures in Iraq, and he was a major wire service, and there were some rockets or something going off in the background, and there were plumes, and he added 2 or 3 plumes in there that weren't there, and they found out and they fired him. And from then on, he had to send RAW film. Everybody in that organization for a long time had to send RAW files, because if you send a RAW file, they can tell if it's been tampered with. And the reason I don't do it is that for virtually everything I do, JPEG fine, and they're big files anyway, are all I need, and I don't want to take the extra time to work with RAW files. So basically, as I said, I'm gonna segue off of the subject, because the subject basically is shooting it as a film mindset and learning fundamentals, and I teach fundamentals. Yes.
Do you think film will be obsolete in the next 5 to 10 years?
No. No, a lot of kinds of film will be. I mean, Kodak used to make probably 50 different kinds of film, and they probably make 8 or 9, 12 now. So they'll cut those out. And if anybody has any Kodachrome that's exposed, the last Kodachrome line in America is going to close on December 31st. And I can't even, I've got an email about it. I think it's in Kansas or someplace. Kodak doesn't do Kodachrome anymore. That's an EPA thing. So, but E6 will be around, C41, which is color negative, will be around, black and white will be around, and there are a lot of people that prefer to shoot it. And for some things, I'll shoot it. First of all, if you shoot a color slide, the resolution is, even with the highest file sizes, it's not even close to what the highest digital files. And then, in a couple of years, they'll catch up. And they're pretty close now. But film still has a much better resolution than digital. And I did they had an exhibit at the tennis in the museum over there a few years ago, and there were 5 photographers that were represented. I was one of them. But when you walked in, the entire wall, which was maybe 20 feet high and about 25 feet wide, was one of my photographs. And it was a picture of the Williams sisters playing doubles, blown up from a 35 millimeter slide, Equestrian slide, and they had mounted 20 or 30 other pictures on the wall, within this thing. And I don't know who did the blow up, but they started with something this big, and it's now the whole wall. I couldn't see any grain anywhere. I mean, I walked, I was standing this far from it, I couldn't see any grain. I don't know who did the processing, but they did a heck of a job when they did it. Yeah, that was Equestrian slide. When I go to these pictures, probably 85% of these pictures that you're going to see are slides. Well, slides are they're film. And done, you know, under every kind of condition, and that's why, you know, I emphasize what I do and how I do it, because we had to learn things that now cameras automatically do for you. Cameras automatically do white balance, they do color balance, they do everything. The only thing they don't do is compose the picture. And they will be doing that. And the fundamentals, the only two things that you really need to remember besides learning fundamentals is that photographs are made by light. And light has two variables. One, it determines your exposure, which is pretty important. The other thing is, it also, you should always be aware, and you look at these pictures, where the light is and what the light does to a subject, whether it's flat light straight on or behind or you know, backlight or side light. Always be aware of it. And the other one is composition. And you should compose as much as you can in the camera, so it'll keep you from having to do it in post-production. I try to, and by the way, I have never developed a roll of film in my life. I have no idea how to do it. I have made prints in a dark room, but I have no idea how to do anything else in a dark room. But I try on Photoshop to not do anything that I couldn't do in a dark room. In other words, I lighten them, I can do some cropping, I can do a few things like that, but I try not to, unless I have a specific reason to do it, alter the picture in ways that could not be done in a dark room. So I'll go into this. There we go. I'll go into this slideshow, and I'll stop these if you want me to stop on any of them, and if you have questions, just please just ask anything you want. There are benefits to being a photographer. So these are pictures from Nepal. And you'll notice composition, and none of these pictures, I'm pretty sure that none of these pictures you're going to see, the Everest is back in the background there. None of these have been cropped. These are exactly the way they were on the film, and I scanned them from Equestrian slides.
Any fill flash?
No. I don't think it's used on any of these. I use fill flash occasionally. I would normally bring and that's with obviously a wide lens. I normally would bring I carry a little camera bag. There's me with the village deal. I carry a camera bag that's not much bigger than that briefcase over there, and it's an amazing bag. I got it, Rolex gave it to me years ago, because that's a Rolex bag, and people are always giving them samples because they want to make bags for them. And it was in the office, and they said, "Do you want this thing?" And I said, "Sure." And I've been carrying it now for maybe 12, 15 years, and it carries it's this big, that high, and it carries an amazing amount of stuff. So,
what do you usually go on the field with?
well, on an assignment like this, besides lugging a bunch of film, which one of the benefits of digital is that now I can carry compact flash cards instead of things of film. That by the way, in most countries overseas, you really have, you don't always succeed, but you have a fight on your hands to keep them from x-raying it at the airport, because they won't, here they'll do it, but because they have to under the law, they'll hand check it. But in a lot of countries, they'll run it through those machines and they'll just blow it out and it's gone. So, but I carry, with the cameras I use, I can carry a 300, which is a 450, 80-200. And I carry about 8 lenses and 3 bodies with me. That one I was in a moving car when she walked out. And so, as I said, all of these are Equestrian. There's no Kodachrome. It's all E6. And They enjoyed being photographed, obviously, and this is one of the water projects. You know, it's unfortunate. This is in India. Years ago, when I'd travel overseas, I would always carry a Polaroid with me. It was extra bulk, and I'd carry, you know, X number of film, because when you'd photograph people, they'd want the picture, and of course you couldn't give it to them because you were shooting film. And so I would take a picture with Polaroid, and there were a couple of instances where I felt terrible about it. I mean, you know, you can't find these people because a lot of them are migrant, and you can't find them to send them the pictures. And I took a picture. It's not in this, but I took a picture of in Spain of some shepherds, and he was with his favorite horse, and they had a black sheep, a black lamb in his arm, and there were 3 of them. And they really wanted the picture, and they gave me the lamb, which I couldn't keep. But he was with his favorite horse, and I felt terrible that I couldn't give him the picture.
How do you handle releases on these people?
You don't have to have a release. She gave me that fish, by the way. You don't outside the United States. You generally do not need a release. I mean, if there's a specific thing that comes up, and I was given, you know, flowers and, you know, the thing on the head in most of the villages that I went to. You notice how much younger I am there. So this is a portrait. This is on Kodachrome. This is actually the woman that helped raise me. And down here this is a picture of the 2 of us together right here on her desk. This is I'm going from here. The next event I'm going to do is the World Equestrian Games, which is a huge event in Kentucky. It's never been in North America. It's 20 days long, and I shoot a lot of equestrian. But the reason these next two pictures are in here is it gives you an idea of what you can do with a longer lens to get separation from the background. Because if you're close to something and you have a wide lens and the background is busy like that, it's going to be in your picture. If you use a longer lens and the closer you are, the more it separates, because the depth of field is not there. It separates the background from the foreground. That's an Olympic champion. And here's a perfect example. Shot head on with a 300, and if I was using a much shorter lens, those people would have been more in focus, and it would have messed up the picture. That's probably 1,000. You can do it. You can do it when they're coming right at you. You can do it at 500, and it'll stop it.
Are you shooting reverse or single frame?
Oh, single frame. These next three pictures are how to use things to frame your subjects, and that's got a flash fill, and that's my favorite player who's retired, Emily Mauresmo, who's French and at one time was #1 in the world, and this was at the Open. This is done on this is an offshore platform in the North Sea, and it's done with the hats. That's obviously a drill bit. This is a guy that makes pacemakers, and you know he's framed by the workers in their white gowns. This was a cover of Signature magazine, not cropped. This is the way I shot it. This was at Ascot in England, and this was a full cover in Signature magazine. Always on film. That I wanted as a silhouette. That's Roger Penske. This was an ad who owns Penske Racing. And we were supposed to do that, if I get correctly, we were supposed to do that inside, and something happened with the building, and they couldn't do it, so I had them push the car outside. This is Payne Stewart. I don't know if you know who Payne Stewart was. He was killed, shortly after this in an airplane. And this is the only picture when he won the Open. This is the only picture of the ball going in the hole. And there were only 2 photographers up on the roof, and the rest of them were down on the bottom. And where they were, they couldn't. There was a swale, and you couldn't see the hole. So this is the only picture of the ball dropping on 18. And there's Payne with the Stewart with the trophy. This is at a golf course in California, and I was at the Open at Olympic, and I was with a friend. I was in the passenger seat, and we were driving back over the Presidio, and these guys had finished, and I looked back and I saw this picture, and I jumped out of the car and I ran back and I said, "Get back out there and putt." So they went back out, and I took about 3 pictures. And my friend who was driving the car said, "Those pictures will never come out." And he's got a blow-up of this in his office now. And they're marvelous pictures, all silhouetted. And I saw the picture as soon as I got out of the car, and I got them back out there, and they putted a few times, and I got the pictures on. No. Nope. That's exactly the way it looked, and that's on film. This is on film. And I was on a highway. This is Positano in Italy, and the sun was setting and only illuminated the town. Wow. And I stopped the car and jumped out, and nothing's changed. I mean, this is exactly as I made the picture. And I jumped out, and took one picture, and that's it. Yeah. Yeah. What? Yes.
2 questions. In being as competitive as I would imagine photographers are, how do you determine where the position you're going to be to get like the Payne Stewart shot when everybody else was downstairs?
Well, that's the trick. I mean, you take a chance, and I wanted that perspective rather than being down there with all the other photographers. And the other photographer that was on the roof with me, who's an absolutely great photographer, you know, he's the only other one that was up there, and you know, it's like the final. When you're doing a tennis match and you're coming up to match point, you've got to decide where you want to be and what perspective, and you sort of guess what they're going to do, and and if you're right, you get a great picture.
Are you a big fan of filters?
I use protective filters on all my cameras. I use ultraviolet filters sometimes, but I don't use a lot of filters. Now, excuse me? I use polarizers occasionally when I'm over water, especially. In the old days, in a lot of sports facilities, the lights were so bad that you had to filter them. The problem with that is you had that's right. You had so much liability already with the speed of the film that when you put a filter on there, you're losing speed, and if you've got your lens all the way open, there's not much you can do except make it slower, and if you make it slower, you don't get the picture. So you do what you can, and that's one of the benefits of digital is you can, you know, now you've got ISOs at 25,000, and yes?
Something I haven't tried yet, but I'm curious about. You have like a UV filter on your camera. You basically leave it on there
all the time, because it's protective.
Screw another filter onto that if you want to put a Polo. Is that recommended?
It's probably not recommended, but it shouldn't hurt it.
It would change the focal point.
It shouldn't. No, the focal point's inside the camera, so yeah, it should not. You might, but if it's a longer lens, you're not going to get vignetting. So this is Bush 41 on his 80th birthday when he jumped, and he did not do a solo because the winds were about 40 or 50 miles an hour, and they wouldn't let him do a solo. And after he landed, he got his wings because it was his 5th jump.
Where were you at that position?
I was on the ground. I had a long lens. And here he is, and he just got his wings. They just pinned them on him. You see him over the flag. And 10 minutes after he did that, a storm came through that was just unbelievable. You couldn't see 2 feet. And there's no way he could have jumped in that kind of weather. No. Here he is. This is at the 95 British Open at St. Andrews. And British paparazzi, who have a bad name anyway, I was walking back down the course from 18. 18 and 1 at St. Andrews are right next to each other, and you can't walk between them. So I was down the outside of 18, and I was walking back down the course, and I came over a ridge, and I saw them down there, and the Secret Service was all over the place. And I walked up, and Secret Service said, you know, where are you going? And I said, you know, I wanted to say hello to the president. said, "Do you know him?" I said, "Yes." And so he said, "Okay, go ahead." So I walk up there, and I'm standing there, and all the British media are being kept in a pen about probably 100 yards away. And they were livid that I was standing there taking all these pictures, and I was the only one there and took all these pictures. Of course, all Greg Norman and Tom Watson and the Bushes have copies of all this. Did what? I didn't hear you. Oh yeah, I know them pretty well. So this is the Prince of England playing polo, Charles, and here's Diana. This is a few years old. This was actually before they got married. And then, of course, Elvis has to be in there someplace. And I shot this with a 600mm lens. We were not allowed to take pictures because they had a contract of some kind. You weren't allowed to take pictures, but I had a 600mm, and it was the only one that had it, and so I shot pictures of Elvis. This is the convention. It's Arnold at the convention in New York. Again, it's all perspective and cropping, and I didn't take one close picture of him. I wanted the whole atmosphere. And that's A.J. Foyt, who you know from racing. I've got lots of pictures of A.J. in his cars, but he wanted me to photograph him with his horses. So I had an ability to see things always. I grew up sort of in an art environment, and I had the ability to see things, and I've always had the ability, hopefully, to communicate. And when I first started, I actually did some good work, and I lived overseas for a while, and I had one body, and I had 3 lenses. I had a 300 4.5. I had a wide angle, which was a 28, and I had a 50. And to this day, I think the best work I've ever done was with that equipment. And now I own 63 Nikon lenses and 29 bodies, and I don't think I've ever done anything better than what I a lot different, but I don't think I've ever done anything better than that. And
One good job, and then someone saw that, and then you got another.
I was in New York, and and there was a legendary photo editor at Time magazine, and he didn't see photographers. And I called him. I had done some minor things, but not much. And I called him one day, and I said, "I'm in New York, and I'd like to see." He said, "I don't see photographers." And I said, "Well, I'm only here for a couple of days, and I'd really like to see it." He said, "I tell you what, I'm having lunch at my desk. If you can be here in 10 minutes, I'll see you." And I got there in 10 minutes, and I had my first assignment the next day. And and I've just always had an eye for it, and I've always been able to do it. And I was creative enough. I learned enough fundamentals, and I did learn the fundamentals by doing it, because we worked in every condition known to man. I mean, I was in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, and I'm in a room that I had to photograph paintings in, and there's probably $50 million worth of paintings in this room. The room is 10 times bigger than this, and the only light in the room, there was a single cord in the middle of the room coming down with a 60-watt bulb on it, and that was it. And I had, we had to learn to work around it. In digital, you can do that. You can't do it with film, and we just had to figure out how to do it. Yes.
What have you done to get your fundamentals so strong?
Experience, and when you work under all the kind of conditions that we've had to work under, that I had to work under, you learn how important the fundamentals are, and you learn how important light is, and the other. I mean, you know what kind of shutter speeds you need to to stop certain things.
How would you know that? Just experience?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know, for instance, if I'm shooting tennis, and I shoot it at 500, and the light's out there at night at 800 ISO, and I don't really go much higher than that. At 800 ISO, it's 500th of a second at f2.8, and that's what they're balanced for. But 500th of a second will not stop the racket head. It'll stop the player, but it won't. But I already know it won't stop the racket head. So you just deal with that.
Beginning shots, pre-focusing, obviously manual
Always manual focus.
Right, so you're pretty focused on an area.
No, well, sometimes, but you know, I can focus. I don't know if I can focus that well now, because I haven't, you know, I don't have to do it anymore. But and the big difference between autofocus and if you're a really good manual focuser is that you just get more images with autofocus, because it does take you, you know, a split second. I tell young photographers now that get in my face sometime about how great they are, that if they ever had to work the way we did, first of all, most of them couldn't focus at all. And if they had to work the way we did, where our clients saw our film long before we did, they'd never get another job. If they couldn't put it on a computer and fix it and delete all the bad pictures, they'd never get hired again. So, I mean, I'll show you, there's some pictures in here that are single pictures that I focused to do, and they're not a lot of these young photographers that can do that anymore. And I'm not sure I can still do it. This is I've worked with Arnold Palmer for 35 years. And this is Nicholas and Palmer, and this is out in Palm Springs, and I had to do an ad with the two of them, and Jack can be ornery at times, and I went up and I saw Jack first. They were out practicing, and I saw Jack first. Their agent called me and said to do it on this day because they were playing together, and Jack came up and I told him what it was. He said, "I'm not doing it." So I went over to Arnold, and Arnold was on the range, and I said, "Arnold, Jack's being Jack," and he said he won't do it. He said, "I'll talk to him." And when Arnold tells Jack to do something, he does it. And so the next day, they said, you know, they were practicing together, and they said, don't do this here. Walk out a couple of holes. And we walked out, and Arnold finally said, "This light okay? My shirt?" And Arnold asked me what color shirt I wanted him to wear, and he wore it. And he said everything. He said, "We'll do it here." And Jack didn't say a word, did everything. And I shot for 10 minutes, and Arnold said, "You got what you want?" I said, "Absolutely." We went on from there. This is Palmer in 1970, mid-70s, at St. Andrews with his caddy. And here's Arnold with the same caddy in 1995 at his last British Open.
He seems to be a very, very nice man.
He is. I'm around him a lot, and every time I see him, I think more of him than I did the last time. He's an amazing man, and he gets mad at me. I mean, he gets mad at people, but he is a remarkable person. This was his last U.S. Open, and everybody else was up in front photographing him walking up 18, and I decided to do it from the back. And when he left the course, I was the only one with him. He was crying, and he went through a secure area, and he asked me to come with him, and I have the only pictures. And he was crying, and I was talking to him and helping him compose himself because they were doing a BBC interview right there, you know, outside of the course. And then he went into the press room, and I followed him in, and TV cameras were there, but the still photographers were not there. And he got up, and they asked him one question. He started crying again, and he said, "I can't do this." And they gave him a standing ovation, which they've never done to anybody. And he left, and I have the only pictures, which ran in Sports Illustrated and 2 other magazines. By the time the other photographers got in there, he was gone. There's his last British Open, and instead of being one of those guys, I decided to stand back and take a picture of all the photographers taking a picture of Arnold. You know? Yeah. That's the cover of his autobiography. There's Ali. That's the Ali Spinks fight. And again, you know, I sort of picked this, and that's not cropped. I mean, I picked that because of the composition of it and the light. I like the light on the top of his arm, and because the lights, you know, mostly are from the top in a boxing arena. And here's Ali getting ready for another fight before he puts his gloves on. No, they were for another organization. This is the America's Cup that I was talking about. And I shot that handheld holding a 600 millimeter lens on the front of a bouncing boat, and it was great. I mean, the pictures are terrific, and if you recall, if any of you follow this thing, this was the controversy over the wing keel and why the Australia was so fast and nobody knew. And when they'd bring the Australia out of the water, they had this shroud around it, and they caught a guy in a wetsuit trying to swim under it the day before I took this picture, and they arrested him. And I was down there to talk to the captain of another boat, and I came through an area that normally you don't go through, and I walked over, and there's a pier that goes right out to that. And I had a camera, and I walked out there, and I put my hand on that shroud and kind of shook it to, and this is 1983, and I thought, you know, there's security people under here somehow, or dogs or something are going to come out and get me. And all I had to do was pull that flap open, take one picture, and walk away, and I decided not to do it. And because I figured, you know, this is their deal, and my agent told me it would have sold for $1 million in 1983. It would have been in every publication in the world. So, next time I'm doing it.
Did they say anything to you?
They do, but it's usually not bad. I mean, they'll wave me off occasionally. But not years ago, but about 5 years ago, I was photographing, and two Amish boys, you know, in full dress, came running over to me, and they said, "Come with us. We have a picture you need to take." And they took me around the back of the barn, and there was a bald eagle eating something out in the field, and they had never had a bald eagle in that part of Pennsylvania. And so I took the pictures, and I sent about 30 prints to the family. And a guy called me, and he was doing an Amish calendar, and he wanted to do it, and I sent him the picture. Then he called me back, and he said that whoever was publishing it had pushed the publication date up, and it was already closed. So this is volleyball.
If they say no, are you going to shoot anyway? If somebody, I had a situation there, boys said no, I don't like to be photographed.
Well,
I didn't do it.
yeah, that's okay, and that's proper. I mean, I sometimes will do it, but I'm not going to take a picture of somebody doing something, you know, that they shouldn't be doing. And I get calls because I have the kind of access that I have. I get calls from the Inquirer, places like that, because they know I can get certain pictures, and I won't do it. And I always ask them, I said, does the subject know that I'm going to do it? And if they don't know, I'm not going to do it. And so you're right. I mean, if they really don't want you to do it, you shouldn't do it. I mean, unless it's something historic or something that you know should be doing. So here, or worth $1 million. But I knew that afterwards. Here's some high fives with the Amish. What?
Do you worry about releases on a shot like that?
Not on things like this, because they would be used for editorial and things. But if it's going to be used commercially, I would probably need a release. And properly, the people that I'd be giving it to would want a release, because it's their liability. I've got a situation right now with a book that was just published, and is now published in 9 languages. No, 9 countries and 7 languages. It's on 25 websites, and they're using my photograph without my permission. So I got to deal with that. So this is, and this intentionally, by the way, I moved around to put those barns behind this, to specifically to have the barns, because I was shooting further down this way. And same thing here. I waited until the horse got in where I wanted the horse in this picture before I made the image.
Do you ever shoot with a tripod?
I do with big lenses occasionally, but not very often. I mean, I use a monopod, but I don't. You know, for most of the stuff I do, you can't move. You can't move the. She's eating an ice cream cone there, and that's not. That's actually as I saw it. That's not cropped afterwards. Tony Quinn, who I knew fairly well, and photographed him in lots of places. There's a fisheye of the U.S. Open Stadium. This was the other day, and I do this every year if the thing gets full. I've got a very close friend who a number of years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, won the World Photography Award as the top photograph in the world, and he's a great guy and he's a good friend. And if you ask him about my ability, he said he will tell you that the only thing I know how to shoot with is a fisheye.
That's digital?
That's digital, yeah. That's Barbara Mandrell. That's for Time magazine. She was flying with the Thunderbirds. There's the two of us. And that is me, whoever said that. The hair was a little darker. That's in Bali. And the light was terrific in this. This is Equestrian. And the light was just marvelous with this picture, and that's what I was looking for in the composition. And you find pictures everywhere. This is in Vermont, and you know, I just stopped the car and waited for the flag to blow out like that, and it makes it a really nice picture. This is a battery plant in Italy, and I went around the world for this company, their manufacturing facilities, but you use that person as a perspective to show the size of the batteries and the depth of field. It's everybody know who that is?
Willie Nelson, Chris Strauss,
and B.B. King. And that's backstage. That's Willie Nelson in the middle, and there they are. There's Chris is sticking his head out there in the side, and then for some reason I was shooting black and white, and then I switched to color and shot that picture. Yeah, they were younger, and there I shoot movie stills, and that's a movie that Chris was making, and that's on the set, and that's a 300 that I was using. 2.8, yeah. That's a lens that's just, for me, that's just magic. It's part of my arm, so I can. And this is a steeplechase, and a lot of photographers shoot this, and they put remotes down on the ground. And another equestrian photographer was with me, and I'm actually on the ground under this thing, and he was terrified. I dragged him down there with me, because if these horses trip, they're going to come right down on top of us. But he got great pictures. You don't know who this is, but you know who Emily Post is, or was? This is her grandson, and this is his wife, and she just died a few weeks ago, and she's the one that continued to do the books after. But he's Emily Post. He's 90, and he's her grandson. I just made this picture last fall. There's Billy Carter. I traveled with Billy for a couple of weeks, and he was actually terrific. He was funny. He was bright. He got drunk every night, but he was drinking Billy beer. Again, you know, I saw this picture. This is up in Newport, and the light was terrific, and the colors were great, and I composed it. You know, moved the boat off center, and you know, it's digital, but it's you know, it's just a great picture to shoot.
Can you talk a little bit about your choices in terms of light, you know, whether it's going in a certain direction or?
But it depends. It depends on the. There's some places where you have to shoot backlit, and you know, you have to learn what the exposure is. But it's very pleasing to shoot backlit because you sort of get a rim light, and you have no choice because the subject is either covered up or there's something that's if there was light in their face and they're wearing a hat or something, their face is just black, so you can't see anything. So you have to shoot it. And I just look at you know, what makes the best. If I can do it, if I can move, and I'm going to get to that later. If I can move and make a better picture, then I'll do it. If I can use the light as side light or something other than direct light. You know, this is at the beach in Texas, and this formation of these are pelicans actually was going by. I used to use a spot meter a lot, but with a long lens, you can use the camera pretty much. Yeah, and the spot meter's in it, and you know, I take light readings. If the ambient light where I am, even if the subject is 150 yards away, if it's the same light, then I can take the reading here and do it. I do a lot of work in the oil industry all over the world. I've shot many platforms in Indonesia and different places, and I did work for years for a boat and helicopter company, and went all over the world and had a helicopter at my disposal. So it was great. And here's Borg at the end of that match. There's the score, and Borg's on his knees. There's a marvelous picture that I didn't take, but from a different angle, one of the British photographers shot. There are people that are in wheelchairs that are in that area, sort of back in the corner, and he shot them with behind Borg, and they are so excited that they're out of their chairs. They have their arms in the air, and it's an absolutely fantastic picture. And here's Borg with a trophy. That's 1980, I think.
So how do you, is there a technique you use to grab focus?
Yeah, the camera. Hopefully. I mean,
when subjects are moving or the horse, the equestrian thing.
Well, I would always, I'd manually focus when it was manual focus, but now we use autofocus. But you have to use it in a way that, a lot of things the camera can't read it. So if that's the case, and I did the first film test for the Panasonic digital, the first field test, and one event that I shot was a horse event, and a guy came out on a black horse and a black jacket, and the camera couldn't find him, and it would zoom in and zoom out and zoom in and zoom out, and so finally I just had to go to manual focus and shoot it manually. So you do what you have to do.
Manual pre-focus.
No, I'll pre-focus sometimes, and I'll shoot a little burst. If I know exactly where they're coming, I can do that. But most of the time, these cameras are so fast today. I mean, these new cameras will stop an object, going 100 miles an hour, coming straight at you. It'll stop it, 8 frames, 10 frames a second.
Now, you said earlier that you still carry around a light meter.
Yes.
And use it all the time.
All the time.
Okay. So, on a picture like the one with the people going up the steps,
I didn't use it.
You didn't use it.
No, but I knew
Okay.
I knew what the
But it
light was.
Experience.
Yeah, I knew what the light was.
You knew what the light was.
Yeah.
Okay. So your mental process really it's there because
Well,
you've done it.
if I know what the light is, and I know what the exposure is in full sunlight, which that happened to be.
Okay.
But if it was a little less than that, then I would have just clicked it open a couple of stops, and I would have had a good image. So no, I just know how to after you've taken. I've got 200,000 edited slides at my house. After you've taken that kind of stuff, you sort of get to sort of know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You always have your camera ready?
No, I have this, but I don't. I should, but I don't. Cameras do it, but I don't know how to do it, so I don't do it.
For someone who doesn't have that experience, in terms of getting the exposure right, should you at least learn
Yes,
what the exposure is in full sunlight,
absolutely.
or what is it a combination of ISO and shutter speed
Yep.
that you're looking for?
Yep. And there are fixed at any ISO or ASA.
Right.
There are fixed points where, I know that with 100 speed film in full sunlight, it's 500 at f between 5, 6, and 8,
Okay.
and that's the exposure. Period. And anything that varies from that, you make the adjustments.
Okay.
And I know that instinctively. So,
Right.
and you can learn. It's easy. You can
But it
get
would
charts.
seem to be really important to learn if you want to begin to get
Yes.
your exposures right.
Yes, and going back to the subject of this whole thing is if you get the exposures right,
Yeah.
your post-production time will, you'll be amazed at how short it is. This is Burt Lancaster. And did any of you see Local Hero, which is a wonderful movie? I was the still photographer on most of the film, and I had talked to him on the set, but I didn't know him at all, and he called me one day, and he said, "Can you come to my hotel and take a picture? I need a picture for Architectural Digest." He said they're doing a story on one of my homes. So I went up to the hotel, and I spent about 4 hours with him, and here we are. Now that's still me, darker hair, and we stayed friends the rest of his life. Stayed in touch and stayed friends the rest of his life. Another benefit of being a photographer. Yeah, amazing. He was a flyer. He was a trapeze artist, and he did his own stunts, and he was always. Yeah, that's correct. This was actually at Belmont. Cab Calloway. Yep. This is the first compact computer. This was the head of Compaq, and that was the first computer, and that was for Fortune magazine. That's in Cannes, and I just like the composition, again, using the rocks to compose the picture. That's on film. Here, it's a nice picture of foliage, but without that boat, it's not a good picture. And I waited, I watched him, and I waited until he got right there before I made the picture. I didn't want him any closer to either side. I wanted him off center, closer to me, and it turns out to be a really nice fall picture.
And the lighting.
Lighting is wonderful. This is a cemetery in England, and it's just beautiful. And it's on Equestrian, so the greens are kind of soft. This is where they filmed Dr. Dolittle. I wasn't there during that, but this is the village that they filmed it in. It's my favorite cemetery. It's Charlie Sifford, a portrait of Charlie Sifford, the golfer, who is known for his cigars. This is I think he was a president at one time. This is Fergie's father. It's Colonel Ferguson playing polo right there in the maroon helmet. That's with a 500 millimeter lens. And that's Condoleezza Rice. That's the first Bush 43 election in Austin in the rain, and I was standing next to her, and I had a little point and shoot camera, and I took it standing. I gave her that picture later. She was very happy to get it. Yeah. And this picture I liked. I have no idea what that would have been if that fence wasn't there, but the bull, who is probably 2 tons, was intrigued by this little boy. I took it with a flash. Yeah. There's the Dalai Lama. He's calling for security to get me out of there. So I'm sure. This is David Ledbetter, one of the famous coaches. This was an ad for Rolex. And if we go back to that, I don't know if I can go back to it. Again, you can see that there's some side light on there, and that's the way I wanted it. I didn't use anything else, but I wanted it imposed that way, because it gives a 3-dimensional effect. It's not flat. And that's, if anybody was an Earnhardt fan, this was his next to last lap. He was killed in 2 laps from this, and that's his last race, and this was his last pit stop. And here he was. I was the only photographer the night before with Terry Bradshaw working for Fox. I was the only one with him the night before the race. That's a long time ago. That's in the 60s. The Dean Martin recording session out in L.A. At that time, trust me, I knew absolutely nothing about what I was doing. I barely even knew what a camera was. I was involved sort of in the recording business, and because a lot of the producers were Texas guys that I knew, and so I was in there. This is an example of, this was for Fortune magazine, and this is drill pipe in a ship, and this is an example of using that element for a design element to make a much more interesting picture. That's in Ireland, one of the canals in Ireland, redhead kids. This is a great picture. Does anybody know who the older man is? That's the man that climbed Everest.
Edmund Hillary.
Yes, that's Edmund Hillary, and that's at the Explorers Club. And when they whoever took the picture of the 2 of us together, Trump is wandering around.
Yeah, that's Donald Trump?
He's wandering around in the background.
Right.
Finally, I grabbed him and I said, "Do you want a picture with this?" So I took a picture of him with Sir Edmund Hillary. And here's an egret. This is on a golf course. Here's an egret that's landing. I took 1 shot of that. That was with a 300, and here's the one that was probably at a 500 per second. And this is the shot that you saw earlier that I shot, and it's a marvelous picture. And as I said, the water from where I was standing, the water was virtually black. Yeah. That's Eva Le Gallienne. That's on a movie set. Very famous actress that died not too long after I made that picture. This is a golf course in Vermont. We're shooting the course and just with all the foliage. And again, you can use all kinds of perspectives to do that. This is in Fez, Morocco. They're dyeing camel skins, and this is a huge area inside, and you can't get down there, so it makes a much better picture shooting it from the top. Again, design in your pictures. If you're going to use a fisheye, there are certain things that dictate that you use a fisheye. This is the Astrodome, and fisheyes are made to do this because fisheyes, as you know, contort things, and as I said, my friend thinks it's the only lens I know how to use. This is the Astrodome many years ago. Here is a picture that was published a lot, and a lot of photographers use remote cameras on this, and I happened to be up on the TV platform and shot that handheld with a fisheye, and it was published all over the place. And this was on the 18th hole at the Country Club at the U.S. Open in Boston. But fisheye is perfect. Here's another fisheye of the flyover at the U.S. Open, and it takes in everything.
So are you carrying 2 or 3 bodies on you around your neck at the same time?
I carry usually 2. I usually don't carry 3 unless I have a real good reason to do it. But I knew the shot, and here's Farrah Fawcett, and it's perfect with a fisheye with all these people because in the middle she's not distorted. The edges are, but it took in the whole mass of people that were there.
Fisheye, is it a 10 or a 15 millimeter?
The one I have now is a 10, but it's on my camera it becomes a 15, and my film one was a 16. I think it's 16. They're both 2/8.
Fisheye rather than a crop eye?
No, fisheye. This is a fisheye from the top of the stands at Daytona. It take in virtually the whole track, and all the cars are there in front of you.
So you don't use a full frame sensor?
No, I've decided at this point not to go back to full frame for a while because I'm trying to get my kit down to something manageable. And you know the reality is if you carry a 300, which becomes a 450, 2/8 with an extender, you've got almost a 700 millimeter f4, and there's not much you can't do with that. And instead of carrying a 500 or a 600 around with me, and it's, I mean, eventually if I continue doing this long enough, I will. But right now, as a matter of fact, I just bought a new D300S here at B&H, and which I've been borrowing one from Nikon. I just bought one recently. That's Flo Kennedy, who was one of the giants of the civil rights movement. She and I became, I won't tell you the circumstances, but she and I became very good friends most of her life. And she died a few years ago. That's fly fishing up on the Connecticut River.
Now, did I understand your answer to the last question, that you don't shoot a full frame sensor?
No,
but
that's correct. My cameras are half rated, 1.5.
1.5?
Yeah.
Okay. And because you find disadvantages in shooting the full?
No, the only disadvantage is that you have to use bigger glass.
Okay.
And I'm at the point where I just don't want to carry those big lenses. If I need them, I use them, but otherwise I just as soon not do it. Once again, this is Halliburton, and this is a fractionating facility, and I use the people to give you a perspective of the size of this equipment. And
Talk a little bit about your thought process as you're
there's your.
beginning to take a shot on it.
Well, I actually I'll get to that. Let me when I get through this, if I ever get through it. Anybody know who that is? No. Woody Guthrie?
Gary Player.
It's Gary Player.
Gary.
That's correct. Gary Player and his famous caddy. And I did this. I made this cover. I shot a sunset, and then I overlaid the picture of Gary and his caddy on the thing. Made that cover for them. I just recently the caddy I was with him. He's retired, long retired. I just gave him a copy of this. I was driving down, this is in Galveston, and I was driving down, and these kids were waiting for a bus, and I jumped out of my car. They all lined up. I took one picture. Got this guy's name, this guy right here. I took one picture, got back in my car, and I sent them all prints. And it's amazing. Every one of them has a great expression. And normally, if you shoot 2 or 3 people, somebody's picking their nose, or they got their eyes closed, or they're doing something. And every one of these guys has a great expression in just one shot.
You ever got a release for that?
No, I didn't publish it. I gave them prints for it. There's some Canadian gooses. Goose eye.
Now, what about the effect on that photo, which is something other than?
Well, no. It's
it's not just the effect because the depth of field is so short. There's something else going on.
well, it's a high ISO.
Okay.
So there's
Getting
some
the grain.
yeah there's a little bit of graininess in there,
Okay.
and it was dark. I mean, it was
Right.
and shot with a pretty long lens. You can see that the background is completely dropped out. So, and it would have been not as good a picture if that background was sharper. This looks like it's on the moon. It's actually on a golf course with a very wide lens. And here, as I said earlier, I am not an expert on the computer. Photoshop, as I said, probably does 500 things. I know how to do 10 of them pretty well. And when I was up here a few years ago when Allison hit Texas and my house flooded, and I lost, among other things, 3,000 slides. And this was one that was damaged, and this is what it looked like. That's what it looked like. And I actually, with very limited knowledge, got it back to that. So, I can't. I don't. I'm not good enough to really. I mean, people that really know how to do that are amazing to me. And there were a lot of them that I couldn't save, obviously, but that was for Golf Magazine. One of the great things about photography is that it allows you to see things with your camera that your naked eye can't see. And you can, I mean, you see this, but you don't see it like this. You see it, the guy, and that's obviously putting a ball mark down. And you get to be able to pick out elements that you can do with a camera that you cannot do any other way. Anybody know who that is? That's Gordon Parks, and both of them very good friends of mine, and Gene Scott, and both of them, they died within a week of each other.
Really?
And Gene Scott was one of the great American tennis players, and he was a good friend of Gordon's, and they played tennis all the time. Gordon was a very close friend. There we are, a number of years ago. Hair was a little darker. Gordon didn't change, but and that's the recent winner at Pebble Beach, the Scot that won the U.S. Open. That's from a helicopter to a helicopter. That's a glacier in Alaska, and I do a lot of work helicopter to helicopter and to offshore platforms and whatever. This is an example. These next shots are rodeo, and I shoot a lot of rodeos and especially country rodeos in small venues, which are great. But this is an example, and you'll see other pictures from the ground. But if you get up higher, you can take all of the junk in the back, the advertising, all that stuff out of there, and it makes a nice perspective. And that's intentionally blurred like that. These are all digital. This was in March. Now that's from the ground level. It's a nice. Obviously, you don't want that bull coming down on you, but you can see all the stuff behind it. This is the Houston Rodeo, by the way. Or like that.
Shooting about 1,000.
Actually, about 500, because the lights are not. You can't support it. Now here, this was when the rodeo was at the Astrodome, and I could get up in the grid and shoot straight. Now you can't do that anymore, and you get some amazing shots from up there. You, as I said, you cannot do it anymore, and there are very few venues in the world where you can actually do that. These are probably 500, I would guess. And this is an intentional double exposure that I did for the rodeo people. That's a saddle bronc and a bull with a clown on the other side. And this is from the upper perspective, and obviously calf roping, and then you can make it as interesting by just blurring it a little bit. And these are all digital. Same thing with this steer wrestling or wrestling. All of you shoot fireworks. The secret is to let the fireworks expose the film or your digital image. Don't try to expose with the fireworks. They will throw off enough light to do whatever you need. So.
Shooting so many different sports events is through one company, or you work for
Oh no,
different companies?
no. I have my own agency now, but I've worked for so many different people, and I've done. There are a few exceptions, but I've done just about every major event in the world at least once. So, this is Rick Mears' fire at Indy, and as far as I know, I have the only still pictures of it. He's on fire there, by the way. I was on my way to his pit. If his car had blown the next pit stop, I would have been standing right next to it. And I have 20 images of this, and Rick has never looked at it. He won't look at them. I've sent some to some of his crew, but he's on fire now. Methanol burns. You can't see it burn, and that's why it's so dangerous. And in one of the sequences, he finally walks into a fireball. I mean, methanol can be burning right here, and you can't see it. And we wear fire suits just like they do. And one of the crew walks into this fire, and all of a sudden you see this big orange thing because you can't see it. And here's Rick after he won his 4th Indy, and if you look closely, you can see where his nose had surgery on it, where he was burned in that fire. And this is what, if you're lucky and you're a photographer, this is what happens. This is Penske's team, and I was in the pit and I photographed this, and I didn't see it at the time, but this car finished first in the race, and that car going by up there is his other car that finished second. And it just happened, and when I took the picture, of course, I didn't see the other car. And I looked at the picture, and there's the first 2 cars in the same picture. Jimmy Carter. But one of the things you can see, any of you watch, I can't think of the name, it's on Monday nights, about the woman that sees things and solves crimes. Medium. And this is her husband. And he and I became friends. I worked with him on this film, which was one of his early films. And this is one of the pictures from the thing. And this became the signature picture of the film. We were on location in New Mexico, and we were sitting down here eating, and I saw that rainbow, and I grabbed him, and I dragged him up the hill, and I said, "Get up that hill and stand it." And I took that picture, and that became the signature poster for the film. That's James Galanos, who was one of the great designers of all time. That's backstage at one of his shows. It's just his fashion week. That's a friend of mine. This is an environmental portrait. Environmental portraits are where you take a picture of somebody in a specific environment that tells a story. And this is a friend of mine and her dog. This is a waterfall. Anybody know who that is?
John Connelly.
It's John Connelly, who was shot, of course, with Kennedy. And I think this is probably the best shoot ever done for him. I did this for Look magazine. And this is out at his ranch, and this is backlit, because everything, there's no light in the front, and I didn't use a reflector or a flash. That's John Newcomb. That was an ad. That's over at the old stadium at Forest Hills. That's a friend in Russia. And there are a lot of portraits thrown in here, different venues. There's Kenny Rogers. I've known Kenny since he was a teenager. He grew up in Houston when he was with Kenny Rogers in the first edition. And again, one of the reasons that these pictures are in here is just to illustrate all of the different kinds of venues and all of the different kind of light situations and that we had to encounter and that was on film, and you had to deal with it. And you had to, you asked about filters. You could use filters, but the problem was, as I said, it slows everything down, and all of a sudden you don't have enough speed. So we had to learn fundamentals and learn how to get around these things. This is Lamar Hunt, who recently died, who owned the Kansas City Chiefs, and Lamar and I. I'm a runner, and Lamar and I. This was down in Jamaica. Lamar and I, for years, ran all over the world. And this is on a subway in the Tube in London. We had just come back from running. And Lamar died, unfortunately. He was an amazing person. Here's a portrait shot, obviously, with a tortoise, who I don't think was, I didn't get a release, but I think probably was okay. But it just shows you the kind of things that you can do, and it makes it more interesting. This is a cricket pitch, and just to give you, this is a wide-angle lens. This is from the exact same place with a 1200 millimeter lens, from exactly where I was in the other picture. This is one of 3 pictures that exist of that, where we went back. This is Martina Navratilova when she defected, 1975, and the dean of tennis photographers, who's in the Tennis Hall of Fame, who was my mentor 45 years ago, grabbed my arm and he said, "Come with me," and we went in. They had a makeshift table there, and we were the only 2 people there, and we got 3 shots, and they're the only ones that exist of this. I actually gave Martina a copy of this last year. That's Mary Lou Whitney. It's a nice portrait of her, and that's exactly the way she dressed and things. There's John McEnroe and his first girlfriend in the backseat of my car. And that was a popular photography cover. And again, that was shot it was indoors, and it was shot from a grid. That's another picture of the fire. You can see the fireball now. It's sort of orange in the back, and this is in Moscow. And this guy, his name is Mel Digiacomo, and he's a remarkable photographer. And we were there together, and he is the epitome of someone who's never met a stranger. I would travel anywhere in the world with him, and these women had no idea who we were or what we were doing. And he goes up, and I mean, within 5 minutes, they were inviting us to dinner, and neither one of them, of course, speak English, and we didn't speak any Russian. Yeah. That's Martha's Vineyard, where the president just was vacationing. And again, I did that because of the light. Because this is in the winter when there are not many people around, and there are not many boats, and it's just beautiful light and the perspective. This is in France. This was on the island where the man in the iron mask was imprisoned. And that's just a nice picture I've used. I can't tell you how many times that's been used in just one of the monks walking along a walk there. This is digital, and this was an early morning fishing boat in the Gulf. This is Moscow under communism, and this was in 1989. And this is in the same place. They're doing weddings now in the same place instead of having demonstrations. And this was in Moscow, in a church, and you're not allowed to photograph, and it's in the winter, and I had a camera under my coat. And the first 3 pictures that I took, they were completely fogged over because it was freezing out, and I come in and there's heat in this thing, and so there's fog on the lens, and finally it cleared, and I got that picture, and it's a wonderful picture, especially of this woman on the right, how it illuminates just her face, and how the votive candles just do that. Yeah. Yes. There's Bob Schieffer, Walter Cronkite, when Walter got an award. This was at an exhibition, and somebody came over to me and said, "There's a spider in there." So I went over and took a picture of the spider I did not use a macro lens. I used I didn't have one with me, and I used a medium telephoto lens. This is from the tournament the other day. This is from up top, and that's Jovatek, and that's one of the things you can do from up top. You don't get all the clutter in the background, and you get the shadow, and it makes it. And this is as he was losing, and he realized he was going to lose. He was right in front of me, and I guarantee you I'm the only one that got this shot. I happened to have a 300 millimeter lens, and he was maybe 20 feet from me, and I got 2 pictures of this, and it pretty much shows his frustration. This is in San Marcos Square, and you can't get up here anymore. There's another picture in there that you're not. And I had climbed up there, and you're not allowed to get up there anymore. Here's helicopter to helicopter. That's in Indonesia.
Was that digital or film?
That was film. That was film. This is film.
That was tungsten film?
It was tungsten film under tungsten light. This is an artist portrait for a book. The dog was very helpful. Patty Berg, who was one of the great golfers, this was one of her favorite shots. I shot that portrait of her a few years before she died. And this is Too Tall Jones, and you can, I don't know if you see, Sweetness is holding him here, and you get that picture once in a lifetime because you had the right lens in the right place. His foot's right in the middle of the arrow, and you're never going to get that picture again. And I gave, when they retired, I gave a copy of that to both of these guys. That's in Cowboy Stadium. That guy, this was for Sports Illustrated. This guy was arguably the greatest polo player that ever lived. He was a cowboy from Texas.
What was his
His
name?
name is, who? I photographed Tommy Lee many times. Oh yeah, I photographed him many times. His name is, he died a few years ago. I'll think of it in a minute. The greatest polo team in the world is this. This is, and they put 40 goal teams together, which is the best team. They put them together with a bunch of 10 goal players. But this is a real 40-goal team, and these are all Argentines. It's 2 sets of brothers, and other than the guy that I just showed you, this guy right here is considered to be the greatest player that ever played. There he is, and they're all retired. Their sons are playing now. This is a portrait of a guy in Philadelphia that owns like 3,000 acres in the middle of Philadelphia. And it's now deeded to the U.S. Park Service, and this is one of the things he grows there. It's a portrait of an artist who does sea life, and that's natural light from the window of his studio with no fill and no reflector. This was a guy that owned Lucchese Boots. He was Sam Lucchese, who I did several stories on him and the boot company, and he died of throat cancer about a year after I took this picture. This is rowing on the Schuylkill in Philadelphia in the fall. And again, you know, I positioned it to have, I didn't want it in the middle of the picture. I wanted the foliage and the bridge. And
Digital?
That's digital.
Because of the colors.
Yeah.
Or the green.
That's in Scotland. That's many years ago, and that's on film. And here, of course, using the reflection and making a very nice picture using the reflection. This is up in Vermont.
Digital.
Huh?
That's digital.
That's digital. This is in Singapore on my 40th birthday, and this guy's drawing a picture of me, which he gave me, of course, and I still have it. He did that. He found out it was my birthday, so he did that. This is in Spain many years ago. And again, you look at the composition, and here's a way to show the St. Louis art, you know, that makes it a lot more interesting than doing it head-on. This is in the Amish country, and I have stopped and photographed on that track for 50 years. And they have trotters. They train trotters. They're not always there, but this day it's in the winter. You can see they're bundled up. That was very early in West Texas. That was a poster for an oil company. That's film. And that's film. And that's the beautiful backlight, setting sun. And the only thing I did with it is I enriched it a little bit. I didn't do anything else to it. That's in Sweden, and that's all natural. And you can see the dock in the back up on the right, and the light just blended right to the sky. This was a Rolex ad. This is a croquet genius. I'm a huge Federer fan. This was from the other day. I'm a huge Federer fan. I've been photographing tennis for over 40 years, and he's just an amazing player. There's that picture again. That was from a clay court tournament earlier this year, and that's the guy that won it. And that's with a 300 millimeter lens from the end of the court. And he is concentrating on the ball.
You say 300 millimeter film?
300 millimeter lens.
I know, but on film?
No, that was on digital.
So it actually...
It was a 450 on my camera. This is the opening ceremonies. Again, the fireworks, and I expose all that for the stadium and let the fireworks do whatever they're going to do. If you try to expose for the fireworks, you're going to blow out everything else. There's Serena, who did not play this year. The colors are great in that because of the background. Again, just an idea of design. And you have to see them. I mean, you look and see these things, and here's the same thing with people watching a clay court match. And if you look around, there are pictures everywhere. And that's from Bay Hill, Arnold's tournament, and I was down there, and it was backlit, and the two of them were, checking the wind, and it's just a nice picture of the two of them throwing grass in the air. Tom Watson, that was from Pebble Beach. And this is a picture that I sold to the National Trucking Agency. I shot that through my windshield at 60 miles an hour. And I'm driving along, and I see that sun, and this truck passes me, and I just picked up the camera and shot the picture. And
While you were driving?
While I was driving, I was doing 60 miles an hour. This is a book that's about to come out. It'll be out at the end of this month, I think, about Chris Cheddar, who's a golfer, and her relationship with Ben Hogan. That's my picture on the cover, and that's the picture that I sent Chris. And there's TV guys there, but Ben Hogan, who of course is not only legendary, but one of the greatest golfers ever, nobody knew who he was. There was not another photographer there. And he came out there to see her. That was when the Women's Open was on. And he came out to see her, and he was out there for 15, 20 minutes, and then he left. And after that, very few people saw him for the next 2 or 3 years, and then he died. But there was not one other still photographer there. They had no idea who he was. So that's a book cover. This is one of my favorite pictures. I took it in Paris, probably in 1968. And I've always liked that picture. That's on Kodachrome. That's in Istanbul. And that's on, I can't even remember the film, Agfa, maybe the 800 film that was unbelievably grainy, but it made this beautiful picture. And the kid jumping up there, that's in Moscow. This is where these horses are now gone. They're in the museum, and you're not allowed to get anywhere close to that. And I had climbed up the back of this building to get that photograph. And you cannot do that anymore. This is obviously the World Trade Center, and this was an around Manhattan race that I was the photographer for. I was the only photographer there, and I was in the boat all the way around Manhattan. Yeah. These are Christmas cards that I've made, and you can easily do this with Photoshop. That I've made it. You can give me some input, and these are all shot in Vermont. And these are all cards that I'm going to be selling, among other things. That's on the road to the Trapp Family Lodge, the Sound of Music Trapp family.
It's extraordinary horse.
Yeah, there were 3 of them there, and this is the Round Church in Richmond, Vermont, and. But you can easily put this kind of type in there, and this was a pony that came over. He came over to see what I was doing, and I was up on the fence, and he backed up a little bit, which was great, and it just made. And he's got his ears up. It's perfect. I think there are a couple more. There's one without any type. That's that same barn.
So these were shot with the purpose of leaving a place to put text?
Well, they were shot, and then I put text in there. This is a picture that I shot in 1968 in the south of France, of a front of actually a restaurant, and I've used it probably 100 times over the years. This is the barn that's next to the horse that was there. So that's pretty much what I do, and I don't think I opened this earlier. Yeah, thank you. These are kind of some of the people that I've worked for over the years, and you can see it's a pretty good list of clients. This is about a fifth of the people that I've worked for over the years. One of the things I have not done is I have not published. I mean, I've had things published, but I haven't done books, and I haven't done that. And I probably should do more. There are people that pressure me all the time. But anyway, that's a pretty good idea of the kind of variety that I've done, and it's been pretty amazing. But you know, you go back a little bit. When we traveled overseas, we carried a limited supply of film, and so you had to make it work, because a lot of places we were, Kodak was all over the world. Kodak was like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola made a promise to the U.S. Army and American soldiers that any place they went in the world during the war, they'd be there, and they did. Kodak did the same thing. Any place the military went, any place tourists went, Kodak would be there. One of the reasons that Kodak suffered when digital started taking over is that they had these bricks and mortar facilities all over the world, and Fuji and these other companies didn't. So they had this massive inventory of facilities that they were stuck with, and it really hurt them. But they did that because they promised the Americans that they'd be anywhere. And I used to get tours of Kodak facilities all over the world. And but we carried, most places you couldn't get film. We carried a limited supply of film, so we had to make, we couldn't shoot 5 rolls of film to get a picture. We had to make sure if we shot a roll of film, it had 30 good pictures on there. And so we get back to fundamentals, and we get back to the same thing that I'm talking about digital, that if you make a picture, if you think about the picture and you make a picture, if you obviously have the time, you make a picture that's fundamentally good. You don't have to play with it. You can if you want to do alterations on it, but you don't have to, and it will make it the experience will be a lot more enjoyable for you, and certainly a lot less time consuming.
Spray and pray is not a fundamental.
No. We do it, but it's not a fundamental. But somebody asked me about doing the work, and you know, there's always, and I teach courses in various things, and I've got these written down here, but you know, there's always the who, what, where, and when thing to do a story. There are 2 other things that should be in there, and that's why and how. And the how is the most important, because if you're working in all different conditions, and pros do it, amateurs do it, you have to be able to be there to make the picture. And in my position, that includes, I got to deal with security, I've got to deal with logistics, I've got to deal with light conditions, weather conditions, all those things. And if you can't figure out how to do that, you can't do it. For years, I was the ABC photographer at the Indy 500. Sports Illustrated had 8 photographers there. Every year, I would take the Sports Illustrated to the guys at ABC, and I was the only photographer that ABC had. And I'd show them Sports Illustrated, and I had the same pictures that all their 8 photographers, and not at the same time, but from all the same perspectives. And they could never understand how I could be in all those places, because this is it's a 3-mile area. And I told them it's because I map it all out. I know how long it's going to take me to get from point A to point B, and how long I can stay there. And every time they were just amazed that I could be in all those places. And you have to do that. And when you do that, it'll make you think about the images from a film perspective as you're shooting digital, and you'll compose your pictures better, and you'll think about your pictures more, and you'll make a better picture that in the long run is more pleasing to you and the people that you're going to share those pictures with, which is one of the great things about digital. You can email them anywhere in the world and share them. And I do, I teach fundamentals of photography. I teach editorial and I evaluate assignments and such. But everything I do, to get to the end, and storytelling, I don't want to get into storytelling because it's the whole thing, but a lot of it has to do with how to be in a position and understand the fundamentals and the conditions to make the story work when you do it. But basically, it all goes back to the fact that I was trained by myself and by friends that helped me as a film shooter. And everything when I push that button, I automatically think that I don't need to shoot a lot of pictures. I need to make the picture that I want, and I might shoot a few more. I shoot more pictures now than I did with film because it's so easy to do. But I don't shoot so many pictures that I can't deal with it. And that's built into me. It's built into my DNA. I just can't do it, and I won't do it. And I won't waste the time or the things. I've had events, huge events that I've done for clients that it's taken me 3 days in post-production, which is longer than it took me to make the pictures. And that's because they wanted specific things and broken down into different files and 100 different files and things. But the pictures themselves, with few exceptions, don't need massive changes. I mean, I might go in and crop some of them in things, but the exposures are going to be good. And I can promise you that if you keep that in the back of your mind, you're going to be a lot happier as a photographer, and your friends that you share these pictures with are going to be a lot happier because your images are going to be good, and you're going to be happier with yourself because you created an image in the camera rather than on this computer. And if you want to be a computer junkie, that's fine, but I'm a photographer. This computer is an annex to what I do. So that's basically it, and that's sort of what I do, and I do everything thinking like this. I don't use film very much anymore. I borrowed this down. They weren't going to give it. They weren't going to make me buy it. I had to pull some big strings to get this roll of film up here, and I got to return it because they make me pay for it. I'm buying a lens today, by the way, so this is a good place to shop.
What kind of lens are you looking for?
I'm getting a 17 to 55 2.8 DX zoom. I have a wide lens. I have the one on the other end of that, but I needed the one that I have is a film lens, and it's a perfectly good lens, but I need another short lens to fill that gap. And the one that I have is a 35 to 70 2.8, and it's a little bit too long for what I want with the DX, with a 1.5 multiplier, so I want to get that lens that fills that gap. And the other lens is getting a little old now. It's not a manual lens, it's autofocus, but it's not as sharp as it should be. So, and this new glass is so good that it's
right. And just from what you're saying about how you use your lenses, you really believe that the zoom lenses in this day and age give you just about the same quality of your fixed focal.
The good ones are remarkably sharp.
Okay.
Fixed focal lenses, they're great,
right.
But the reality is, you got to carry 6 of them where you can carry one good zoom lens. And that's right. And I carry three zoom lenses, and a 300 2.8, and then I have a macro lens. I carry a fisheye. I carry a very wide fixed focal lens, and that's it. I carry 2 strobes and 3 bodies, and there's not much I can't do with that. I mean, I can't make a 1200. Excuse me. I sometimes have to do that. But if you're shooting wildlife and you're really far away, you can't do it. But if you need a 600 or 800 millimeter lens, but for most things you're pretty good. Yes.
What camera do you use? What's the model for the picture
of a tennis player? This is a Fuji, which my Nikon people wouldn't like me doing, and it is a Fuji. They've got a new one. This is a Fuji something 100, and they've got a 200 out. And I called the Fuji people, and I said, "This is the model that I want." And he said, "No, you don't want that one. You want this one." And it happened to be he didn't even know it, but it had a $100 rebate on it. So I bought it, and it's just a remarkable camera. I would like the screen to be a little bit bigger. But it's a terrific camera and just razor sharp. If I blew that picture up, you can read that trophy, every word on it. So I carry that with me just about all the time, and for a point and shoot camera, it's true. And most of these, the Nikon or the Fuji or the Canons, they're amazingly good. And what you want to look for is enough pixels to make a blow up, bigger screen, and the zoom. A lot of them are 40 to something, and I want them to be wider. And so this is the equivalent of a 28 to 105 or something, and you can find them now. There are more of them on the market now that are 25 or 28, as opposed to 40 to 70 or whatever, 40 to 120, because if you're shooting landscapes or you're shooting groups of people, you don't have to back up all the way to get all of them in the picture. So, so if you find a wider lens, bigger screen, and at least 10 or 11, 12 megapixels, that's all you need. I mean, you can get bigger ones. You can get 16, 18 megapixels, I think, in these things now. But for that, a 10 megapixel will blow up 16 by 20 all day long if it's sharp. So anyway, that's it. Hopefully, you will consider those things when you take your pictures, and you will be more conservative and think more about the fundamentals that you have, and you can pick them up from books or other photographers, friends. Everybody has some trick that they use, and they're all valid. And hopefully it'll make your pictures better, and you'll be more pleased with them. So thank you very much. Thank all of you for coming.